Alastair, hello. Welcome onto my podcast.
Hello, Luke. It's an absolute pleasure to be here.
Yeah, nice to have you here. So, this is the first time we've actually spoken to each other. But for my audience, they may be aware of you already because you do a podcast for learners of English. Just tell us quickly about the show that you do.
Sure. So it's called English Learning for Curious Minds. I have been doing it for 3 years now, almost, I think. Yeah, almost 3 years. And the idea is it's a kind of narrative show. So it's just me researching stuff and talking about what I call weird and wonderful things. So that could be the lives of famous historical characters. It could be kind of interesting ideas or concepts that are going on at the moment. Almost, it's kind of it's a it's a avenue for my own curiosity, really. If there's something that I'm interested in, it gives me an excuse to kind of really go down a rabbit hole and try to find out as much as I possibly can about it, and then kind of package it up into a neat 15 to 20 minute episode where I'm just talking to people. And yeah doing that for 3 years or so. And it doesn't seem like 3 years, but when I look back, it actually is. Yeah, it was December 2019 that I started, and have been going ever since.
Yeah, I had a quick look through your episode list. You've got some interesting topics in there. Like I think a recent one you did was about the mystery of Lord Lucan.
Yeah, it's a really fun story.
Yeah, and that's one that I, like some time ago, I was like, oh, I'd love to do the story of Lord Lucan on this podcast as well. But it does require a lot of research in order to get the full story and then to kind of do the story justice. So I guess, you do lots of research for your episodes then.
Yes, I do. It takes a lot of preparation, and a lot of the times, even when I go back and when I listen to them again, or if even as I'm recording, I'm thinking, it would have been interesting to develop that in a bit more detail, or there's something that was missed, or whatever. But I try to do the best possible job I can of presenting a story or a subject in a interesting and accessible way. And in the case of something like Lord Lucan, that's a story that kind of writes itself, really. So for the benefit of people who might not be familiar with this story, it's of an English aristocrat, really, a very wealthy gentleman from the top of British society who is suspected of having murdered his nanny and who disappeared from the country and was never seen again. So that is a kind of murder mystery, but not really a mystery because it seems quite clear that it was him. But the whole story around it is fascinating.
Yeah, and it's also a story that sort of everyone in the UK, maybe from a certain generation, people who are around, at the time, because it happened in the 70s, the 80s?
Yeah, this is going to be embarrassing because I did make an episode on it. I think it was either late 70s or early 80s.
Yeah, that does happen to me too. I'll research an episode, and I'll do an episode, lots of facts and information and stuff. And then as soon as I've recorded it and published it, all the information that I've researched just leaves me completely. So Lord Lucan, everyone in the UK who was around at the time knows about that story. A really interesting mystery. Okay.
And there'd always be stories in the tabloids coming out of, someone spotted Lord Lucan, or he's, sitting on a beach in Thailand, or doing all these sorts of things. And inevitably it wasn't, but it's fun anyway.
Yeah, stories of him, people thinking that they've spotted him, or people sort of thinking that he had plastic surgery and now he looks slightly different and stuff like that. Yeah, good story. But what about you, Alastair? So you're an English teacher, right? A TEFL teacher like me, is that right?
It's actually not right. So I have taught English in the past. When I was at university, I taught English in the summers in China. But I kind of think of myself more from the point of view of like a language learner rather than a teacher. because I haven't taught since I was 22. So yeah, it's 14 years now. And yeah, so it's funny because through the podcast, people will write me emails and say like, hello teacher, and like refer to me as a teacher, but I don't really think of myself as a teacher at all. I don't have kind of formal training. I don't have any of that kind of background. So I guess my focus is on trying to create interesting stories that people might want to listen to and kind of learn with, and allow people to do their own learning with it, rather than trying to claim some great expertise in terms of actual teaching.
Yeah, you're making content that learners of English can use. Yeah. Yes. Okay. So before 2019, I guess, which is when you started, what were you doing? I mean, what have you done in your career so far?
Okay, we're moving on to the job interview bit.
Yeah. Explain your CV. Justify your past.
No, so I studied languages at university. I studied French and Italian, and then did a master's in Chinese studies. And then after that, I kind of actually just left the world of languages. I worked for startups in London for almost 10 years, and then moved out to Malta, which is a tiny island in the Mediterranean, if people were not aware of where that is. And then started the podcast relatively shortly after.
Okay.
So complete change of life, location, and direction, I guess.
Okay. Interesting things for us to talk about there, with maybe startups you've worked for and Malta as well. But I think we should come back to those, because let's continue talking about your podcast. And so you are about to, or maybe when people listen to this, you already will have published a kind of story series on your show. And these are not true sort of true crime or non-fiction stories, but a fictional series of stories. It's a sort of science fiction adventure story, I understand. It's called Pioneers of the Continuum, which is a great title. And you've managed to sort of recruit some other podcasters to help you tell the story. So there's a trailer. I'm going to play the trailer for this series in a moment. But first, just tell us briefly what Pioneers of the Continuum is.
So I saw you searching for kind of a good term to how to describe it. I also had no good way of talking about it. And then I was talking to someone the other day who described it as a audio drama, which I think I'm gonna take. I've stolen that. Okay. They actually admitted that they'd stolen it from someone else. But so Pioneers of the Continuum is a audio drama for English learners. It's essentially a story about a group of historians, scientists, and linguists who travel back through time. And there are 8 episodes, so it's relatively short. And each episode is narrated by a different person who tells the story of where they went to, kind of why they went to that place, that time in history, and what happens. And inevitably, they all get into a little bit of trouble. They're surprised by what they find in different ways. And yeah, I was kind of working on this idea, this story, and wanted each of the episodes, each of the characters to be played by different people. And I thought it would be far more fun if I could actually ask a group of well-known podcasters if they'd like to play one of the characters. So the result is what I would like to think of as a kind of all-star cast of English language podcasters, which doesn't include me. I'm actually not in it at all, because if I was in it, it wouldn't be an all-star cast. So to kind of go through the people who are in it. Obviously, they're...
Well, hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Before you do that, before you tell us who's actually in it, let's play the trailer. Okay, I'm going to play the trailer now, and maybe listeners, if you do listen to other podcasts other than mine, because, of course, other podcasts are available, maybe you can see if you recognize some of the voices here. So I don't know how many people we're going to hear.
7.
7. Okay, so there are 7 voices from 7 episodes. There are 8 episodes in total, you said?
Exactly. The last 2 are played by the same person. There's the same character.
So 7 different English language podcasters in this series. Can you recognise the voices? This is the trailer for Pioneers of the Continuum, which is going to be available. Well, we'll find out when it's available in a moment. But this is the trailer for Pioneers of the Continuum.
Launching on May the 23rd, Pioneers of the Continuum, a time-travelling story for English learners, featuring your favourite English language podcasters.
I was travelling back 100 years to 1939. My mission? I was going to kill Adolf Hitler.
When he heard me refer to Caesar in this way, Valerius spun around and held his gladius to my throat, his face a matter of centimeters away from me.
Oh, I said. Like jigsaw puzzle pieces locking into place, a picture began to form. I shouldn't have come here. I shouldn't have meddled.
I'm not sure if she liked my smell, deodorant and aftershave, but she certainly smelled like someone who hadn't spent much time in the shower.
I found myself in a cold and damp warehouse, exactly as planned. I was in the men's toilets, also as planned. I knew that it would be empty in the middle of a suffragettes meeting.
What are you doing in there with my goats?
I think I had a little bit too much wine and must have fallen asleep.
Will the future be a utopia? A perfect world where people live in peace and harmony? Or a dystopia? A broken, destroyed world where humans live in misery?
Okay, listeners, so did you identify any of those voices? I think I got 3. Well, obviously, I identified myself. I was the first one because I'm in episode 1, right?
You are in episode 1, and you have an important mission, which I will not reveal, but it's an important one.
Okay. So we're not going to do any spoilers, right?
I don't think we should do any spoilers other than the fact that everyone gets sort of more than they bargained for when they go back. Everyone goes back with a particular idea in mind, and they're a bit surprised by what they find, as I imagine would be the case if anyone travelled back through time.
Okay, so going back to the voices that you heard, listeners. So there was me at the beginning. Then I identified Lindsay from All Ears English.
She was number 3, yeah.
Okay. There were a couple in there that I didn't recognise, I have to say. Anna from English Like a Native.
Mm.
Christian from Kangaroo English.
Yeah.
But those are the only ones I recognise. Sorry if I didn't recognise you, anyone. But who else was in there?
So who do we have? So there's you in the first episode. The second episode is Andrew from Culip's English podcast.
Ah, yes. Okay.
The third is Lindsay from All Is English. The fourth is Tom from Thinking in English.
Mm-hmm.
The fifth is Anna from English Like a Native. The sixth is Ariel from Easy Stories in English. And then 7 and 8 is Christian from Kangaroo English.
All right. Good stuff. So, I mean, I don't know how much I can reveal. Can I say that in my story, my character has to go back in time? Well, yeah. My character chooses to go back in time in order to assassinate someone.
Yeah.
Do the other characters, are they also trying to do a similar thing? Are they going back to assassinate someone, or, is there a famous person involved each time? Are they? What kind of missions are they on? These people?
They're all on slightly different missions. So your character has this personal mission to go and kill someone. people can see it from the title, it's someone that people will be aware of. But the other characters, they travel back in time, sometimes to fix things in their personal lives, sometimes to go and change something or spread a message, other times to go and kind of find out truths that they might have thought were true and wanted to validate. So there's really a mixture of reasons. It's not just I think you're the only person who is trying to kill someone.
Okay. So how do they actually travel in time? Because, there have been a number of different time travel stories that we all know of, some of the most famous ones being like Back to the Future, and then there's like the Terminator and Avengers Endgame, and H.G. Wells, the Time Machine, of course, which maybe is the first one. I read that actually last week on holiday.
Oh, really?
Great story. And others as well, and they all have different ways of traveling through time. Like obviously with Back to the Future, it's the DeLorean, which has the flux capacitor, which is somehow opens up a rift in the space-time continuum for a certain period of time. You've got to be going 88 kilometers an hour in order to get through before it closes and slices the car in half or something. Do you actually go into detail about the method through which these characters are traveling through time?
In a word, no. So the focus is more on what happens when they get there. The time travel mechanism, I guess, is they just get into a box.
Yeah, really. So
and someone presses a button.
You've decided not to go too deeply into the actual technical stuff.
It actually, in our first drafts of the script, we did go into a lot more detail about how time travel had been invented, and that didn't make it to the final cut, which I thought it was a little. It could have been interesting, but I think it was a little bit of a diversion from from the rest of the actual stories. And the episodes are all relatively short. They're sort of between about 12 and 18 minutes or so. So I felt like trying to get into too much detail about that could mean that the characters don't have enough time to do what they want to do when they get back into the past.
Yeah, you can easily get kind of bogged down in all of the technical details of exactly how time travel works. The other thing that occurred to me when I was thinking about this was that in any story that involves time travel, there's always a sort of problem that needs to be dealt with, which is how does traveling through time affect the present or the future? Like we see that famously in Back to the Future 2, where Marty goes back to the past and certain little changes that he makes cause significant changes to his life. That's actually Back to the Future 1 as well, of course, because he starts to disappear, doesn't he? His he's there. He accidentally travels back in time. He ends up meeting his parents and accidentally sort of causes them to not to meet, really, or not to get together and never to be married. And if they don't get married, he disappears. And that's the drama. It's like he's trying to get his parents to get together. And if they don't get together, parts of his body start disappearing and stuff. So in that version, the past clearly affects the present that he's come from, and in other stories there's other ways of doing it, like for example I can't think of other examples at this moment. I think in the Avengers one they find a way to solve that problem, but did that occur to you? Did you have to deal with that issue?
Yeah, so in this story they travel to slightly parallel universes, so changes that happen in that timeline have got no impact on their own timeline. But towards the end of the series, without giving away any spoilers, it becomes clear that it doesn't work quite as they thought, and that traveling in time back and forward is problematic. So we dealt with it by having this concept of parallel timelines where changes in the past don't affect changes in the future. But, of course, even though these characters think that they are incredibly clever and smart and have invented time travel, they haven't done a perfect job. Let's put it that way.
Okay. Did you write this yourself, Alastair? Is it this is a solo
No,
job?
I don't want to be trying to take credit where it's certainly not due. I worked on it with a colleague called Emil, and he was the kind of primary scriptwriter, I guess. And I took the role of kind of editor, writing other stuff. And in fact, quite a few of the other narrators kind of contributed and changed parts of their episode as well. So if you listen to the story and you like the style of it, then that credit certainly doesn't come to me.
Okay. How can people listen to it, and when can they listen to it?
Sure. So it's called Pioneers of the Continuum. So Pioneers of the, should I spell Continuum? Well, I realized the other day that Continuum is a kind of confusing thing to spell, because if you try to say W at the end, people assume that's a W. But yeah, so it's a Continuum being CONTINUUM.
Yeah, it's got two U's next to each other, which is quite rare in the English language. I can't think of any other examples of when we have U and U next to each other. Can you remember when we have two U's? I don't know.
I can't think of another example.
I can't think of any others, but anyway, it's a sort of interesting word for that reason. Okay, so it's called Pioneers of the Continuum, and it's going to be available on your podcast, right? On English for Curious Minds? No?
It's his own podcast.
Okay.
So you can now, if you search on your podcast app, Pioneers of the Continuum, then hopefully it should pop up. And yeah, the first 3 episodes will be released on May the 23rd. Which I'm not sure if that's going to be before or after this, but that's when they're coming out. And then on, there'll be one a week for 5 weeks.
Okay. Yeah, May the 23rd. I think this is going to be published about 5 days before that, so 5 or 6 days. So I think that this episode is going to go out on the 17th of May. I probably shouldn't be mentioning dates, because that's always a huge mistake as a podcaster. Yeah. If you actually say the date, or if you refer to any specific time, or if you give the episode number, then you kind of shoot yourself in the foot, because if you need to make changes, then it's like, oh God, I need to remove those things. But I'm pretty sure that this is going to go out on the 17th of May. So listeners, check your podcast app. Search for Pioneers of the Continuum, and that's the best way to find it. 3 episodes, I think, will be there waiting for you from the 23rd of May. All right, cool, great. Is there going to be a series 2 or something? Are you just going to wait and see?
Oh, maybe. I don't know. I'll wait and see how what people think, and perhaps there might be a series 2. Yeah, it's been super fun to work on, and of course it's given me an excuse to collaborate with people like you, so it's been a really, really fun and enjoyable project to be a part of, so I'll be very happy to find an excuse to do it again. Okay, brilliant. So going back to you then, we were talking about this is the job interview thing again, although I'm not interviewing you for a job, we can relax. So you moved to Malta, but where are you from actually originally? So it's always a kind of slightly confusing question for me, because I moved around quite a bit when I was younger. I was born in Swindon, which I imagine listeners might not be aware of, but it's a kind of town that is always it's a kind of butt of jokes about being a kind of boring, nothing going on there town. There's a series that people might know called The Office, which is based in Slough, and they merge with the company from Swindon. So that gives you perhaps an idea of of what goes on in Swindon. And then it's very much like Slough, isn't it? Swindon, and they're quite close to each other. They're sort of next door to each other, aren't they? Are they not? So Swindon's in Wiltshire. Slough's just West London. I guess it's 100 miles or something like that. Okay, so in my brain, I'm thinking you go from London, you go west, you go through Ealing, you get to Slough, and if you keep going west,
you'll get to Swindon.
Yeah.
Right.
But before you get to Bristol and places like that, you'll get to Swindon.
Yeah. Okay, right. Yeah, so it's closer to Gloucester and Bristol than it is to London. You go basically London, Slough. If you keep going west, you go London, Slough, Reading, and then Swindon, and then Bristol. Yeah, and Bath.
And not a recommended road trip if you're looking for if you're looking for things to do in the UK. But yeah, so I was born in Swindon and then lived around there for a while and lived in Scotland too. And then kind of I guess most of my life I've spent in London.
Okay. And when did you move to Malta again?
In January of 2017. So yeah, it's been here for 6 years or so.
Can I ask what caused you to move to Malta? Why did you move to Malta?
So it's actually my wife was offered a job here, and it was originally a 1 year thing, and 1 year turned to 2 years, turned to 3 years, 4, 5, 6. And and we're still here.
Malta's an interesting place. So as you said, it's in the Mediterranean, location just south of Sicily, which is the east of Tunisia. So it's like an interesting spot there in the Mediterranean. What can you tell us about Malta then? Can you give us any sort of like interesting bits of info about Malta?
Sure, I can give you plenty of bits of info about Malta. It's a very strange place. I think that's probably the first thing that people think when they get here. They're not really sure what to think, especially as a Brit. It's kind of strangely familiar in some ways and very different in other ways. So Malta was actually part of the British Empire from 1814 to 1964, I think it was. So almost 150 years. And there's still a lot of like British signs there. So the kind of obvious ones from, there's like the red post boxes. There are less obvious ones to non-Brits perhaps, like all of the traffic lights are exactly the same kind as you get in the UK. And things that you don't really notice if you haven't lived in the UK, the plug sockets are all the same as the UK.
Oh, you've got the 3 pins.
Exactly, it's great. And
they are the best. I'm sorry, everyone, but they are the best type of plug.
They are
nice and solid and chunky.
Yeah,
solid. They don't fall out too easily. Although I find in the EU, European plugs have caught on in more recent years, and they do have the 3-pin system as well. Yeah. But okay, yeah. So same kind of plugs. Do they drive on the left? Do you drive on the left there or on the right?
Yeah. On the left, like on in the UK.
Left.
Yeah,
on the correct side of the road, then basically.
There's a lot of it's a kind of tourist hotspot, and there's lots of Italians and French and Spanish and people from Europe, and you'll be very surprised at how many times I find people just driving on the wrong side of the road.
Oh gosh,
actually on the wrong side of the road, which is, if you saw that happening in the UK, or I'm sure in most of Europe, you'd be very surprised. Perhaps not in the north of France, where you've got people coming over from the UK and just assuming that things are the same. But yeah, it happens a lot. You have people driving on the wrong side of the road.
Right. Wow.
And kind of veering across.
Yeah. I can imagine Italian or French people there just like forgetting and driving on the right. Yeah.
I've even I've been in a car with my wife and caught her driving on the wrong side of the road as well. I had to say, shift over.
You might be driving on the wrong side of the road.
Yeah.
Okay. Languages. What about languages in Malta?
So Malta actually has 2 official languages. There's Maltese, which is a kind of Semitic language. So it's similar to Arabic. It's has some similarities with Turkish as well, and it uses a lot of French and Italian languages. It's a very strange language to hear, and also English. So English is an official language of Malta. It has exactly the same kind of standing from a legal point of view. So it's been one of the good relics of British occupation, you could say, for the Maltese, because it's meant that it's a relatively easy place for people to come because they can speak English. There's a lot of English schools here too. So it's quite a big destination for people coming to learn English, whether that's European teenagers who might be coming for a bit of summer fun and language learning, or people who are coming from more serious reasons, people who are taking career breaks, or people who are kind of emigrating from another country and kind of coming to an English school and properly learning English here. So there's tens of thousands of people who come here every year to learn English.
Yeah, it is a huge destination for learners of English. Why do you think that is? Well, I mean, obviously they speak English there, but are there any other reasons that occur to you?
So I guess people are obsessed. Maybe is the wrong word, but they're very keen on this idea of immersion English. So if you need to learn a language, you have to go there. That's the only way of doing it. We can perhaps talk about whether that's true or not later, but that is certainly an attraction for lots of people, because they think, I want to go and do immersion English. I want to go and be in a country where I'll be surrounded by English all the time. And clearly there are options in terms of, you can go to the UK, you can go to Ireland, you can go to North America, Australia, South Africa, and so on. However, for someone who might like the idea of going to beaches or being in a smaller place, then perhaps they don't want to go to Edinburgh or Cambridge or London or somewhere like that. So Malta is kind of an attractive destination for that reason. It's also a little bit cheaper than clearly London or New York or places like that. And the other attraction too, which is a large attraction that I hadn't really considered properly before, but it's that Malta is in the EU, so people who are non-EU citizens can come to Malta, and then they can very easily travel around and visit other European countries pretty affordably through Ryanair flights and stuff, and kind of use Malta as a springboard for doing all that kind of stuff.
You can sort of get a student visa to study in Malta and then kind of use that as a springboard to visiting other parts of Europe. Precisely, yeah. And I guess a lot of European people as well go to Malta. Like I'm thinking, I can imagine sort of French, Spanish and Italian people who don't want to go to England because it rains. And they're scared of the bad weather and the bad food. They basically want to be able, they want to have an immersion experience in English, but with good weather and reasonable food. So they're like, oh, go to Malta then, right?
Yeah, indeed. And I think judging by the amounts of teenagers who especially come here in the summer for kind of 2 or 3 week courses, I'm sure if you are certainly thinking back to when I was a 16-year-old boy, and if my parents had said, you can go and study English in Dundee, or you can go and spend 2 weeks on a Mediterranean island with a whole lot of other 16-year-olds and pretty liberal laws when it comes to drinking and bars and stuff like that, then I'd have gone to Dundee.
Sure.
No, clearly it's an attractive option for lots of people, but the food and the sun and that kind of stuff means that it's probably a lot easier for a parent to persuade their child to go and study during the summer if that studying is going to be in a warm place.
Yeah, definitely. And being in the EU, as you said, is a definite advantage for non-EU residents, as you say, as a way of kind of like, as a starting point for visiting other places, but also for EU residents because they don't have to worry about, like, is it in the Schengen zone?
Yeah.
So they don't even need to worry too much about immigration and passport control and currencies. They've got the euro.
Yeah.
So pretty convenient. Yeah, it's a great advantage for the country, isn't it, to have these things, to be in this location and to have English as a first language.
Yeah, I think talking about time travel and parallel timelines and what would have happened if something else had been the case. I think if Malta had not sort of had that experience as part of the UK, and if Malta didn't have English as an official language, then it would be a very different place now.
I wonder. Before the British kind of took it, let's say, before it became part of the British Empire, was it under control of the French?
Yes, it was briefly, and it's a very I can tell you a funny story that that underlines how most people in Malta think of this difference. In that there's a museum, I can't remember exactly which museum it is in Malta, but I think it's a museum of Maltese history, and it refers to the period of French occupation, but the period of the British government. So
very interesting. Yeah, interesting use of language there.
Yeah.
So they call it the French occupation, but the British government.
Indeed, even though it was essentially the same thing, it was a foreign power occupying a country and saying, now you play by our rules. So,
why is that? Why is there a slightly different feeling there? Is it just because the British were the last people there, so they kind of wrote the where's that? Where was that written? In a museum?
Yeah, that's a kind of official, well, not quite official government policy, but clearly someone had kind of looked for how do we describe this period of history, and this was the occupation, this was the government.
Interesting.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. Does Malta? No, it doesn't have. It's completely independent now. Does it have the? Does it have King Charles as the head of state?
No, that was I think from 1964 when it became independent. It ditched the British head of state.
Yeah. Okay. Interesting stuff. What about those immersion courses then that you talked about? You raised the question of whether they are effective or not. So that's an interesting thing to talk about. Immersion, and there's different types of immersion, of course. But is immersion the best way to learn a language? What do you think? I mean, I don't know if you've managed to see this or observe the effectiveness of these immersion courses. But what do you think about that? Do you think that immersion is like the best way to learn a language?
So I think if you're immersing yourself in a language and you're surrounding yourself with it, and you're actually making an effort to kind of only exist in that language, then clearly that is a very effective way of doing it. I think the mistake that lots of people make is this assumption that if you just go to a country that speaks a particular language, so if you go to the UK or if you go to Malta, then you just automatically kind of absorb this language just by existing in there. Which,
like it's like the English is in the air. It's in like the oxygen particles in the air, and just you just absorb it by osmosis or something. Yeah, okay,
exactly. Or even if you go to one of these countries and you go to a school, the idea that the kind of you just like tick the boxes. You've bought the plane ticket. You paid the course. Now it's just a matter for the English to kind of seep into your body. I'm sure that everyone knows plenty of people who might have had a similar kind of experience, or perhaps you know people who are currently in that kind of world, and they know that it doesn't quite work like that. So that I think is the mistake that some people make when they come here, is that you just assume that that's going to happen, and lots of people, understandably, because Malta is so international, you kind of fall in with people who are from your country or who speak your language, and you suddenly realize that even though you might be going to class for 3 hours a day, everything outside of that time you spend speaking French or Spanish or Italian or whatever language might be easier for you. And don't get me wrong, I completely understand how people do this, because I've actually done it myself. When I was at university, I did an Erasmus placement in France and Italy, and when I went to France, I kind of fell into the trap of spending my time. I kind of made friends with lots of Brits and Americans, and suddenly, even though you are improving your French to a certain extent, and you're going to French university and you're doing these things, you realize that you haven't made, it's not quite so immersive as you might have thought it would be. And I also did 6 months in Naples in Italy, and in Naples, basically no one speaks English. There were no foreigners at all. So that was a 6-month existence purely in Italian. And the difference was marked in terms of my own improvement.
Just that point there, you in Naples, you were forced to speak Italian. What was that like for you? How old were you, by the way? You were at university level.
Yeah, 21.
Okay. In Naples, no one spoke English. You had to speak Italian. What was it like? How long did you spend there? Another quick question.
6 months.
6 months.
5, 6
so
months.
what was the first month or two like?
So I was studying, I was studying Italian already at university. So I could speak to a reasonable extent. And Naples is a very strange place compared to the rest of Italy. So the people in Naples obviously speak Italian, but there's the Neapolitan dialect, which is very different to Italian. So there's a few times where I would find myself kind of trying to figure out whether is that person speaking Italian or Neapolitan, and some people kind of slipping into dialect when they'd be talking with friends and stuff. So I did already arrive with a relatively decent level, probably I don't know, B2 or something, kind of worked up from there.
Okay. So it wasn't like it wasn't like you were desperately trying to work out what the hell was going on and sort of sink or swim situation. You had some.
I had a base. Yeah.
Okay. All right. Yeah. So immersion. Yeah. It depends on how you do it. There's good immersions and bad immersions, and exactly as you said, just simply being in the country doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to learn the language really well. You have to. You have to be mixing with people who actually speak the language, and you have to be actually focusing on it, and you have to be motivated, and you have to be working on it and stuff like that. Okay. When you came to France, where did you live?
In Lyon.
Okay. Oh, very nice.
Yeah, it's a lovely city.
Yeah. Okay. What was your experience of living in France versus Italy versus the UK then? How was it living it? What was your experience of France?
It was very good. I like France. Clearly, is a lovely place. And before that, I lived in Lille in the northern France for 3 months or so. So I was familiar to a certain extent with French life. But yeah, it was a lot of fun. French university was a slightly strange experience because it seemed to me more like school than university in the UK. It was a lot of, in the lectures and stuff, there would be people like throwing paper airplanes, and it often seemed to be more kind of crowd control than actual teaching. But yeah, it was a fun experience. Obviously, it was Erasmus, so there's a lot of international people there. And yeah, it was great. We kind of, the university was disrupted quite a bit because there were strikes. This was 2007, I think.
Doesn't matter what year. Doesn't matter what year, Alastair. There's always strikes.
I can't remember what the strikes were about this time, but there were lots of strikes.
Work, something to do with work, probably.
Yeah. So lots of strikes. Not a huge amount of university because it was closed, but lots of fun. I mean, I know now, thanks to Brexit, Erasmus is not a possibility for people in the UK, which is sad. But if anyone is listening to this and has the opportunity to do an Erasmus placement, I would definitely recommend it because it's a lot of fun.
Yeah, great. There are certain stereotypes about France. Maybe they're just Parisian stereotypes, in fact. People visiting France, or maybe just visiting Paris, often have the same kind of comments. One of those comments is that French people refuse to speak English, right? And that they're rude. Waiters are rude, and people refuse to speak English. Is this true in your experience?
Well, I guess in Lyon and in Lille, I was speaking French, and so it was. I didn't find that people. I wasn't trying to speak English to people, so I didn't see that so much. I mean, without offending any French listeners, there are, of course, I did find some rude waiters, but you can find those anywhere, I think. I mean,
I think so.
Do you find in Paris that those stereotypes are true?
Well, not really, no. I mean, it's like with most stereotypes, there's maybe a little bit of truth in it, and then lots of, I don't know what, like a lot of mistruth or misunderstanding or like one idea being communicated and sort of, when one truth kind of gets transferred by word of mouth, then it spreads. And it's maybe just like the experience of some tourists who come and they don't realize the social codes, and they forget that they're in a different country which has another language. And France is quite proud of its language, of course. It's an international language, just like English, and with a rich history. And so French people, obviously are going to speak French. I mean, it seems so obvious, right?
Yeah.
But another thing is that, so what does happen is that sometimes, people, it's a bit confusing because there's two different complaints, it seems, that English speakers make. And whether these are right or wrong is a question that I can answer in a second. But one of the complaints is that people refuse to speak English. I don't think it's right that they refuse to speak English. It's just often, in my experience, people are actually quite shy about their English in France. And what maybe some people take as arrogance is like, no, in France we speak French. Instead of, it's rather than it being arrogance, it's more just a case of like shyness, that French people are actually kind of a little bit modest about their English, and French people will always say, we have terrible English, we're the worst in Europe, and this sort of thing is what they will often say. So French people actually can feel pretty shy about speaking English, and that might be the reason, rather than it being some arrogant refusal. It's more just like, they actually feel kind of uncomfortable about doing it. The second thing is actually, certainly more and more recently, French people do speak English, and in my experience, Parisians will instantly switch to English with me, which can be annoying for another reason. Like if you're trying to practice your French, if you go in with less than perfect French and you start speaking to people, they will instantly be like, oh, okay, I will speak English to them because I want to be helpful, and B, it's a great chance for me to practice my English, and for years they are told at school, it's hammered into them, you have to speak English, it's really important, you got to be competitive on the world stage, and all these sorts of things. English is the international language of business now, so you've got to speak English. It's, it's like really important. It's told, they're told by teachers and parents. And so a lot of younger people will jump at the opportunity to speak English and to kind of show that they can do it, which can be a little bit annoying if you're trying to learn French, because you just go in and say bonjour, and they're like, oh, hi, how can I help you? And you're like, okay, so so it's, it's not really true, the kind of arrogant thing. But then again, there are going to be some sort of arrogant people who are just who are a bit rude, just like everywhere. Maybe French waiters can be a little bit rude, but sometimes maybe I think people just misunderstand the social codes. Like people go, like let's say English people go to a French cafe or restaurant or something, they expect the same social system to be in place. Like you go to a pub, everything's very informal and relaxed.
Yeah.
And you can just wander up to the bar, the barman's kind of chilled out and friendly, whereas in a French restaurant you are wandering into a place where there are sort of certain high standards of service and food, and things are a bit more formal. And so what British people perhaps don't realise is that you have to say bonjour at the start, or bonsoir, and if you don't do that, you're being rude, and so maybe like English speakers just they kick off the rudeness without even realising it. They're actually doing something rude first by not saying bonjour or not doing the right things, and then the waiters are just responding to your rudeness, you know?
I can remember very clearly going to being in a restaurant with my English uncle once, and he'd asked for a pint of beer, a large beer, and it came. And as people who drink beer in France know, the foam comes to about here.
Exactly. The beer goes up to there's probably maybe 3 centimeters or so of foam or head from the top of the glass to where the beer actually starts. Yeah.
And he had taken this as some kind of huge affront, a huge offence that the beer had not been filled up to the top, because it is in British pubs, it is an acceptable thing if the beer is not right to the top. You can say, "Excuse me, can you fill that up?" without sounding
that up a bit,
without sounding completely terrible.
Yeah.
But it was, laughing about it now. The waiter obviously was incredibly offended, and sort of, I think there was even 2 attempts to fill it up, and it was like, and it became some kind of battle. And even I was about 13 at the time, kind of deeply embarrassed at what was going on, even kind of knowing that this was terrible. So I completely agree that sometimes often it is the fault of the English speaker. And then going back to your point about French people, and perhaps you could expand this to anyone being shy when someone asks them a question in English. A lot of native English speakers are really bad at adjusting the speed of their voice, so they kind of just burst in and kind of assume that you know what I'm saying, like talking very, very fast, and not kind of adjusting their language at all, kind of not knowing that, in fact, the person that I'm assuming is going to speak English, they might, obviously it's not their native language, so let me just adjust my use of idioms, let me let me slow things down a little bit to try and make life a little bit easier for this person. If I'm gonna make that jump and assume that they can understand what I'm saying and will respond to me in English. So I can completely understand why people are a bit hesitant if they have some kind of loud, impolite and fast speaking Brit or American or Australian, whatever.
It's sort of a lesson in diplomacy, really, because it just shows that goodwill is like really important, and you've got to enter these situations with massive levels of goodwill, where any little misunderstanding has to be brushed off with a bit of a smile and a laugh or self-deprecating humor or something. You've got to be willing to be the one who's doing it wrong, and otherwise things can descend quite quickly into that person's being rude. And then, but from the other point of view, the person thinks you're being rude, and it's just everyone's being rude to each other, and no one's wrong. The other person is always wrong. Whereas in fact you may both be wrong. And I think a big factor in that is confidence. Actually, so let's take an English person going to a restaurant in France, and their French is not very good, so they're doing it in English, and they do feel a bit of shame about that. And if they don't feel shame, they will feel a sort of weird sort of kind of I don't know what the word is for it, a certain sort of stubborn pride of like, okay, so I don't speak French. They will somehow justify it to themselves, where they're like, well, no, English is the international language, and blah blah blah. So either they'll feel a bit shy, or they'll compensate for that by kind of just leaning into it and appearing to be quite arrogant. And when you're not confident, if you're feeling a bit shy because you can't speak French, then what do you do? What can happen is that little level of shyness can cause your English to go really bad, go really wrong. I've seen, tourists in bakeries in Paris, and they don't, they can't order their food in French. And so they're doing it in English, but they feel really ashamed that they're doing it in English. And so their communication skills go completely wrong. And they're like, can I have just, this kind of really crap English, where it's like, and that's just, they feel terrible. The person serving them picks up on the fact they feel terrible. It's awkward. And sometimes in those conditions, things There's no goalkeeper there to catch the ball.
Yeah.
And so the ball falls on the floor and everyone feels like you did it wrong. No, you did it wrong. And then everyone comes away from it feeling bad.
Yeah.
So, that's why the goodwill is important. And knowing how to communicate to people who don't speak English as a first language, you have to kind of smile. I don't know. Complicated.
People in the UK, I think, just don't have that much experience with this, and especially for people who don't travel so often outside the UK, or don't live outside the UK. They just don't have the idea that you might find someone and ask them a question and they might not speak perfect English is a little foreign perhaps to them. Strangely enough, even when they go to, if they go to Paris or Madrid or other places. And I've seen this a lot. My wife is Italian, and I see lots of my cousins, friends and things like never adjusting their English at all. But her English is very good, but still, she's a non-native speaker. And so it is a kind of strange thing to see that for lots of Brits, and I'm sure Americans, Australians, other native speakers of English, they just don't have this concept that their language can be adjusted, even though it's very easy to do. It's not a huge skill. It doesn't require kind of huge brain power or skills. It's just a kind of switch in mentality, and it makes life a lot easier for the person who you're trying to communicate with. Either you speak so fast and use difficult language that person can't understand what you're saying, and perhaps they misunderstand it. And so the whole point of communication is both people can understand what's going on. And if you, as the person speaking, have managed to mess things up, then I think that that's your fault. Yeah,
absolutely. Yeah, unfortunately, taking the example of British people, they don't have that much experience, and this is getting worse, I think, with learning a second language as well. Where their experience of using a second language has been in some classroom when they were 14 years old, and that was awkward enough. And you talked about crowd control in the French classroom at university. Yeah, there's probably a lot of crowd control issues in classrooms in the UK in a language class. I remember my French lessons at school. I went to just a normal comprehensive school, state school, and I'm sure most of the kids in my class could not care less about learning French. Like, they didn't see the value in it or the usefulness. They had no intention to go to France, really. And so they just weren't engaged with it at all. And so for the teacher, it was really hard to keep them involved. And it meant that it was really hard for the lessons to go well. The teachers couldn't really teach the kids properly. It was really hard to develop a really good, positive relationship with French. And so many people's experience is just French is just like this funny, weird, awkward thing that we had to do at school. So there.
And I'm sure it's even that situation is even worse now in terms of people feeling like learning a foreign language is not so useful because when we were at school, I guess people of our age in France, perhaps their English was not so good. Whereas now I'm sure people who are of a school age, there's that expectation that they can probably chat to their French or Italian or Spanish contemporaries in English. So if you know that people from other countries will be able to speak decent enough English, then I can understand why sitting in that classroom and being forced to kind of go through all the avoir or whatever, then you probably think this is a bit pointless.
Yes, and especially when the curriculum also doesn't put that much importance on it. Like when learning a language is not one of the compulsory subjects.
Yeah, it's now dropped, right?
It's been dropped. Yeah, I don't really know. I don't know, but I know that it's not compulsory. That much I know. Whereas when I was at school, you had to do one of the foreign languages, either French or German in my school. But these days, yeah, it's an option. It's an optional one. And so, yeah, the value of it just in the school system has been reduced, and yeah, many reasons. Yeah, that's a pity. Definitely a pity.
Yeah, it really is.
When you were in France, are you a musician by any chance?
So very amateur, right? So I said before that I'd lived in Scotland. My dad's Scottish, and I learnt the bagpipes.
What?
Yeah, so I could play the bagpipes. But
Seriously?
For listeners who might not know what the bagpipes are, they're the kind of Scottish traditional instrument. It's essentially a large bag that you hold under your left your left arm. You squeeze it, and there are pipes that come out, and you have to blow a lot of air into it. And it's very loud, and it sounds. I think it sounds lovely. But so it's a kind of it's the kind of instrument that people probably don't put on in the background when they want to have a relaxing bath.
Or dinner party.
Or dinner party, yeah. So it's a very loud instrument. And yeah, I learnt this when I was, from when I was 7 or so. And
wow, really?
Coming back to France, I guess sort of all roads lead to France. When I just finished school, I wanted to go and try and improve my French. So I was a bit of a stubborn 18-year-old, so I thought that I would try and just get the train to France as you can still, I guess. Get the Eurostar. To Lille, and which was the first stop on the train. Mm-hmm. And my completely naive idea as a 18-year-old was that I would just take my CV and I'd go and get a job in a restaurant, because people would love to have an English speaker, and it wouldn't matter so much. My French wasn't so good, but anyway, I'm sure people would absolutely love the idea of employing me. And I went to Lille, and I spent the first week or so going around different bars, kind of handing around a CV. It was basically blank, because I was 18, had no achievements to speak of. And surprise, no one ever called me back. And even a few people were like, no, like definitely not. No point even leaving your CV. It's just going to end up in the bin.
You basically got, non, c'est pas possible.
Yeah, non, c'est pas possible. So anyway, that was that. And it swiftly became evident that I was not going to have a successful career as a French waiter. But as a kind of fail-safe, I guess, to try and like extend my trip a bit if this career as a waiter failed to take off, I brought my bagpipes, which they're quite large. They come in a kind of large suitcase, so it was not just a small thing. Because in London, I used to busk on the weekends, so I used to kind of stand on bridges and play the bagpipes, and generous people would put money in my box. And I thought, well, if all goes wrong, then I can do the same thing in Lille. And I did it. Yeah, so I think the first day I dressed up in full outfit, kilt and jacket and all that kind of stuff. And I went to stand next to the train station, just outside the train station, kind of wondering, right, are the French police going to come and shut me down, or is someone going to throw an egg at me or something like that? But luckily, after 5 minutes or something like that, someone came and dropped 20 cents, and then it kind of continued from there. So I was there for about, I think 2 months, something like that, busking every day and making friends and kind of exploring the city. Wow. That was just made possible via the bagpipes. So it was a fun experience for lots of reasons, but also I think as a 18-year-old, you're sort of, for me at least, it was this idea that actually you can kind of make your way in the world to a certain extent, in terms of you've got this skill, even though I'm not good at the bagpipes at all. I'm not claiming to be a talented bagpipe player. In fact, at one point when I was busking, someone, a Scottish tourist, came and gave me a little bit of advice on how to adjust them. So obviously that I was playing in such a terrible way that he thought, right, I've just got to go and tell this guy. He assumed that I was French or something. Anyway, so I did that for 2 or 3 months and lived this slightly strange existence where I kind of wake up in the morning, go and play the bagpipes for half an hour or so, because it's a very physical instrument. You can't do it for large stints of time. Go and play.
A lot of breathing. You've got to you have to blow quite hard into it, I guess. It's them, isn't it? It's plural, bagpipes. Yeah. I never actually thought of whether obviously pipes is plural, but I'd never really thought of whether it's a singular or a plural. Well, I suppose you blow into a certain part of the bagpipes. So you blow into the the bag, the bag.
The bag. Yes, but it's very physical in terms of, obviously it requires a lot of breath, a lot of puff, but also your lips kind of start giving away after a certain period of time. Anyway, so I do it for like half an hour or so, and then just to kind of go back and claps because I was too exhausted, and then go back again in the afternoon, and that would make enough money to pay for the like really crappy hotel room that I had. It was a hotel that was right next to the train station, and I think it was like €20 a night or something. So I mean, I guess it's a bit more now, but that gives you an idea of the kind of hotel it was. And I found out later on that it was a hotel that was used by people who would go there with their lovers in the middle of the afternoon. Mm-hmm. So that's a
love hotel.
A love hotel, although for me it was just a normal hotel.
Yeah, okay. I understand the kind of thing. Yeah. Not officially a love hotel. Although I use the term love hotel, although I've only ever heard that term used in Japan. Yeah.
I think it was manned by a kind of old Frenchman who had a permanent like rolled up cigarette in his mouth, even when it wasn't lit. And it was a very you had to pay to use a shower there. I think it was like €3 for the shower, and to get into the shower you had to kind of go past his little office, and sometimes he'd be there kind of snoozing with the cigarette lying out of his mouth, and you could kind of dash past it and get in the shower without having to pay your €3.
Oh my gosh. All right, so €20 a night. You can tell what kind of hotel it was, but also you could find out how much money you can make on the streets of Lille playing the bagpipes.
I mean, it's I don't know, like I think probably in my best day I probably made €100, which to an 18-year-old, even now it's a pretty decent amount of money to be making every day. But it was a kind of a magical experience, this idea that I had this skill, and you could just go and do it for a little bit, open up a case, and people would support you.
Yeah, great. You said you're not a great bagpipes player, but you're certainly better than me because I've never done it. How do you actually play the bagpipes?
So you start learning on a little thing called a chanter, which is essentially like a recorder. So the kind of
the long straight pipe.
Exactly. Yeah. And then that's how you start learning. And then after a few years, or probably after a few months if you're better than me, but you graduate to the actual bag. So
okay. And it's so the fingering. So it's the bag, and there are these pipes that stick out of the bag. Yeah. But then there is another pipe which has holes in it that you put your fingers over those holes, a bit like the way you play a recorder, right? You have to sling the pipes kind of on your shoulder.
Yeah.
The bag goes under your arm, and then in your two hands there's another pipe that you hold, and you press your fingers over the holes on it.
Indeed.
Meanwhile, there's another pipe that's in your mouth, and you're blowing into it, but also squeezing the bag under your arm as well.
It sounds like a sort of operation with like various bits going into your body. But so you have the bit which you're playing with your hands, which is called the chanter, and the act there is exactly the same as with the smaller ones. So you practice with this, and then you just transfer that down under your arms.
Yeah.
Then you have the mouthpiece, which goes in here, and that's kind of constantly in the sides. And normally you have a little bit of rubber, so you're basically biting it all the time, going.
Yeah.
And then there are 3 what are called drones, that are these big sticks, I guess, that just come out at the top, and they rest on top of your rest against your shoulder. And the trick, or is it the trick? Is it just the thing that you have to do to make it sound not terrible? Is make sure that there's always air going into the drones, because the drones give that background kind of
the drone.
Yeah. So they give that bit, and then the tune comes from the chanter, and you have to keep the pressure in the bag pretty consistent and high. So you kind of blow in, and then when you're blowing, you let your arm out a bit, and then when you take a breath, you squeeze in.
Yeah. So with that kind of movement, blowing and then squeezing, you're making sure that air is always passing through the drones.
Exactly.
So you get that underlying, the underlying drone, and then on the top of that, you can use the rest of the air to actually play the tune over the top of it. So when you were busking with the bagpipes, what were you playing? What tunes were you like? What were you doing? What Wonderwall? Like what can you do on the bagpipes?
It's quite limited in terms of what you can play. I think I'm going to get this wrong, but I think there's only 9 notes. So like Scottish traditional marching songs.
Yeah. So the whole thing, I guess those notes are in a certain scale, and you kind of like just play different sort of melodies across that scale, I suppose. Something like that.
I was just imagining people thinking that I just practicing scales all day, like 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 7.
Not exactly.
No. I guess what I was playing is just variations on that. So there's, I don't know, songs like Scotland the Brave that people might know of. There's Wings,
Mull of Kintyre.
So a few more, I guess, more popular ones, but I don't know if you can play Wonderwall on the bagpipes. I'm sure people now will be Googling or YouTubing Wonderwall bagpipes, and doubtless someone has played it, but I was not.
Okay. All right. Great. Okay. Well, Alastair, it's been really cool to talk to you. And
likewise.
Yeah, so I hope that Pioneers of the Continuum becomes a massive smash, and that you win an Oscar for the best adapted screenplay. And I get an Oscar for best supporting actor or something like that. It's not going to happen.
I'm sure there are podcasting awards or something.
Yeah, there are. Oh, there are podcasting awards. Yeah. Who knows? We may be in tuxedos, getting papped before we know it.
Let's leave it as a maybe.
Yeah, okay, let's do that. All right, brilliant. Thanks for talking to me. And just remind everyone, if they want to listen to your stuff, what's it called? Where can they find it, and all those things?
Sure. So if you want to listen to Luke going back in time and going on an important mission, as well as lots of other people in that time traveling series, it's called Pioneers of the Continuum. And I also have a podcast called English Learning for Curious Minds, if you want to check that out.
Okay,
and I guess maybe we can put links somewhere to.
Links will be in the usual places, either in the description of this episode, or they'll be on the episode page on my website, which is normally where I put stuff. Okay, well, brilliant. Good. Have a lovely rest of the day in Malta. Sunny? Is it sunny there?
It is, in fact, not sunny at all. No, it's been pretty dark. So you see lots of people coming off their aeroplanes, kind of tourists, with their hats and shorts, and then being slightly surprised that it's cold and wet and rainy.
Okay, good. I'm glad, because I'm glad that it's cold and wet and rainy there too, because it's cold and wet and rainy. Well, it's not cold, but it's certainly wet and rainy and grey here in Paris. I got completely soaked this morning, so I'm glad I'm not the only one, and that you're not living in wonderful sunny weather, because that would be unfair.
That would be unfair indeed. Cool. Okay. Well, thanks so much, Luke.
Yeah, you're welcome. All right. Cheers.
Thanks. Bye.
Cheers. Bye.